Welcome back. I've got Dan Berger in line. Dan, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Looking forward to this conversation, your book, and everything else. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll start this wonderful conversation.
Sure. I'll start today and kind of go backwards. So I live in Boise, Idaho. I live there with my wife, Jen, and daughter, who's 4 months old. I'm 43. I moved to Boise after a decade in DC, where I started my last business. It was a software company, basically AutoCAD for event design. Got it 20 million in recurring revenue and sold it for 100. Um, and yeah, prior to that, I was, going to grad school and learning how to program and adjusting to life in America because I moved here when I was 9 from Israel. So English was a foreign language to me. And I wrote my book to kind of help people find their sense of belonging, which is something I've struggled with my whole life. And I'm right now building retreat venues all over the United States.
That's awesome, and your command of the English language is better than most people that were born in the U.S. But so you definitely did the work, and that's one of those things where eh, when America is built on immigrants. It's since its inception, and it's always I always love hearing stories about people that came here and had nothing. They just showed up and nothing, and they were able to parlay it, and you sold your business for $100 million. That it's one of those things where it inspires and it gives people hope. It's like go out there and create something. And I've got a cousin that is crushing it, and he created something out of a hobby and being tired of the device that he created. He couldn't get what he wanted out of the devices that were available in the market, so he built his own. And one thing led to another, and it made him very, very successful and immensely proud of him. But it's one of those things where you just the tenacity to just go after it and do it and crush it. And one question before, because I definitely want to talk a lot about the book and finding your purpose and everything else is. Okay, you moved from DC to Idaho. Now I've been in both places. Um, uh, Dramatically different, to say the least. So what drew you to Boise? And what about Idaho? Because obviously DC is its own entity and it's all the
Right.
nuances and all that. But why Idaho? Because I've noticed, there's been a spike. I don't know if it's just universal or something else, but there's just a lot of people that I've been talking to lately that are calling me or jumping on the Zoom call, and they're in Idaho. So, what's going on there that the rest of us haven't heard about yet that it makes it such a wonderful place to be?
Well, for those who can tell, for those listening, watching on video, there's a giant building behind me, and that's clearly not Idaho. I'm in New York City, where my wife's going through some fertility treatments. But I am in Idaho full time, and so there's two questions you asked. First of all, how I landed there, and why do people go there? I'll start with the second part first. What's special about Idaho is that I like to say it's the team building capital of the United States. It has more recreational opportunities than anywhere in the country, including 70% wilderness, which is the biggest in the 48, in the lower 48. It's got more river acreage than any other state. It has over 200 hot springs, 1,000 alpine lakes. It's just incredible, incredible landscape. And for anyone who's kind of interested in getting away from the hustle and bustle, it's a good place to be. I like to say Idaho is a work to live state, not a live to work state, like most of the big cities we're all used to. What drew me to Idaho is COVID. During COVID, I just sold my company. I was flush with resources and I had all the time in the world. So I kind of hopped on the road and decided to, you know, party across the United States with some friends. This is when I was single and in my addiction. Um, and I'm now a recovering addict. And I yeah, I did 15,000 miles in 4 months. And one of those places was Boise, Idaho, and I fell in love with it and said, what if? And that what if became a reality. So I moved there, and now I look at it, 5 years later, I kind of think that it's called there. My spirit was called there. I needed to slow down. I needed to reconnect, and I need to settle down.
It's a beautiful state, and I've been there a few occasions. A good friend of mine from high school served in the Air Force, and he was stationed at Mountain
Oh,
Home Air
you're
Force
Charlie Mountain
Base.
Home. Yep.
Yep, yep. So I remember there, and this date said it was like way back, and I remember going there when he was in service, and he's kind of showing us. He was a mechanic, so he worked on, the planes and all of that. And he's like, "Well, here's this and this," and then there was this door that had a small window, and it was completely blacked out. I said, "What's in there?" He says, "I can't show you what's in there." I'm like, "Ah," so it was one of the stealth planes that had not been publicly announced yet. Later on in life, I found that was the case, and heard rumors about it because Popular Science had talked about it, but I was like, okay, you can't show me that. Nope. It's like, all right, I don't want to get you in trouble. But yeah, and I remember having a snowball fight. And it was 95 degrees up in the mountains. So that was a surreal experience to say the least, because I was in a t-shirt and shorts and 95 degrees and having a snowball fight. That was an absolute blast. Found those photos the other day, actually, ironically. I'm like, oh, wow, that was such fun. But the beautiful thing about the world today is, we can work pretty much anywhere we want. And in your situation, obviously coming off an exit, and then and congratulations on overcoming an addiction. That is not an easy thing to do. Have growing up in a family that struggled with alcoholism and drugs and gambling and all that stuff. I've seen firsthand, the challenges of trying to overcome all of that. So, kudos to you on overcoming that. And I know it's a day-to-day thing, and continued speed and success to you on that. But so once you land and you're like, okay, now what do I do? And you shared, some of the work you're doing in the book, The Quest, and I love that title because it has so many different directions it could take. But I think so many people, and I work with teams and individuals that are burned out and struggling to have a good, healthy workplace culture and all of that. And there's a lot to it when it comes to, I think so many people just simply don't know who they are. They don't know what their purpose is. They somehow have checked out to the point where they're just living life on autopilot. And you ask them, well, what's your purpose? What do you live for? I just live. I'm like, okay, but for what? I mean, there's a reason why we're all here. What's yours? What's motivating you? What's waking you up every day and having you excited about the day? And I find more and more people they're just not. So let's talk about the book a little bit. What motivated you to write the book?
Yeah, so I like to think about my life as a series of belonging traumas. I realized I didn't really have a sense of belonging kind of later in life. I'm adopted, so that's kind of the first belonging trauma where I'm like, your biological family basically tells you to take a hike. And my dad abandoned me when I was 2, so it was just my mom and I. And then obviously when I talked about immigration, where I negotiated my identity from a very young age. So those three belonging traumas kind of made me, give me self-esteem issues, made me feel worthless and broken. And I realized I just never really had a sense of belonging. So I when I had all this downtime after my exit, I decided to spend it, just looking for my sense of belonging. Part of it was moving to Idaho, part of it was leaning in to my Judaism, part of it was, um, you know, kind of editing my friends, adding new ones, sunsetting old ones. So, getting married, obviously. So, I studied the issue, read a ton of books, read all these academic journals. My book has 120 cited works. So it's not like a self-help book as much as it is like a meta-analysis of what's out there in a very palatable, approachable, thoughtful, deliberate way. And yeah, so that's what it is. It's a very kind of deliberate guide for how to find your sense of belonging. And as it relates to teams, which is what you touched on, what I like to say is you can't have professional belonging before you have personal belonging. So it's really hard to feel a sense of belonging on a team unless you know who you are, as you alluded to. And that's kind of what I help people kind of figure out in my book is how do you find your sense of belonging um, on your own?
It reminds me, I worked for an insurance automation company back in the late 90s, just outside of Chicago. And I've talked about this on the show a couple of times. And I was part of the installation team. So there was a dozen of us, and we were sent out across the country every week to install the insurance automation systems at independent insurance agencies at their locations. And the 12 of us, band of misfits is a great way to put it. Each of us, not one of us was alike. We were all different, every one of us. And what was so cool about the group, though, was the management, recognized, okay, you guys you never really interact with each other because unless it's a larger installation where we need two of you, we were usually solo on our trips. So, they decided, okay, we need to start bringing you guys in at least once or twice a year. Let's have a team, for a week. We'll bring you in, we'll put you up in a hotel, unless you were living in the area, because a lot of them didn't live in the area, and just kind of get to feel like you belong as a team and not just these individual assassins that would go out and do the job and go back home and wash, rinse, repeat. And when they did that, it was such a magical experience because, again, 12 individuals, all of us were so dramatically different from each other, but we all gelled, and we did that a few times. And then what worked out really well was there was an opportunity. We had several installations uh, coming up in New Orleans. There was, I think, five different insurance agencies of varying sizes that were, that bought our software and wanted to have installs on site. So we were able to coordinate it for 1 week. This was about a month after Mardi Gras, for the entire installation department to go down and be in New Orleans for a week. Now, upper management and the executive is going, "Are you kidding me? This is going to be a train wreck of train wrecks. They're all going to be partying. Those are going to be the worst installations ever. We're going to have to go back and spend thousands to fix the damage that they do." So they were not on that, and we were like, "No, we got to convince them. How do we do this?" So what we ended up doing is there was a in-house retreat, about a month before the schedule was supposed to be done. So what we did is like, okay, we have to do a presentation to convince the executive to allow this to happen. So what we did is we mapped out this thing where all of us would work on all of the installs to get them done quicker than we normally would, but we would allocate more resources to every agency, even though they only paid for, let's say, one or two installers, they would get all 12 of us, depending on who, what we were doing, or maybe five or six. And we mapped it all out, got everything and scheduled it and all that, gave the presentation to upper management, and they went, "I can't believe we're agreeing to this, but we're going to do it." And we did. And they're like, "Well, this is going to be a mess. We know this is going to botch up." It was the best installs any of us ever did. There was never any issues with it. We all got so many letters of recommendation. It was getting nauseating, because we crushed it. Why? Because we first felt like we belonged, to the team. We were all confident and we all belonged with each other. We were a band of brothers, and it, basically other departments were then studying us, try to figure out how do you get your team to work together better? Because they were looking at us and seeing, what makes you guys tick? Because we look at each of you and we're like, these people should not get along with each other. Why are they so cordial with each other? It was just, the effort we put into it at the beginning, to create that sense of belonging. And it was such a magical experience. And again, that was decades ago, but I still feel the energy from that, experience and working there. And I'm forever thankful for the opportunity. So organizations that are struggling with keeping their people and all of that, create that sense of belonging. Create an environment to help people feel like they belong. And I tell you what, when you do that, it changes things, and you've seen it.
I think that's right. And I think that a lot of people, it's so first of all, belonging is really hard to do. McKinsey just came out with a study that says productivity does not increase with return to office. It stays the same. However, two things are decreased, and that's innovation as well as psychological safety. And that's because you really can't give psychological safety digitally and not in person. So I think you're absolutely right. And there is a very simple way to create a sense of belonging on a team. It's a very simple framework that I lay out in my book, and it's basically 5 steps. You can also download it on assemblehospitality.com. It's my new company. It's a free kind of like 5 slides or something. But basically, it's the 5 steps are hospitality, make people feel uh, walking into a warm space, followed by safety, create that safety as a result of the warm space, engagement, make sure there's a share of voice and people are talking. From that, you get commitment, and from that, you get belonging. And a lot of people just don't think about it that way. And that's how managers should think about it.
I love the hospitality angle because, when I first saw that, I'm like, okay, like the hospitality industry, but there's a lot to be said about that industry and the lessons and how they work with people and treat people and making you feel like a welcome guest. That we're so happy that you're here. You have that in a work environment, it changes things. And there's an organization that I help out with on a very part-time basis, just to do something different. Excuse me. And it's I think about that and the ownership and how they treat their people, and they make you feel like you're a long lost relative that they haven't seen forever every time you show up. And it's genuine, it's not forced, it's real, and you belong, and it's such an amazing place. So
Sure.
it, it's one of those things the workplaces really should focus on. I'll, pardon me, I'm gonna cough real quick. So I always ask authors this, is there a favorite chapter or section of the book that you find really important?
Um, it depends. If you're a team leader, then the bonus chapter, which is available for download for free on belongingquest.com, that's the best chapter. I really like the middle of the book, which anybody who listens to the podcast and reaches out, I can send to them for free. It's about the traditional and non-traditional paths to belonging. There are actually 6 paths to belonging, and I think about it like a fuel tank, like how many paths are in your fuel tank and what percentage are they taking up, and the goal is to get to 100%, and you can use many different paths to get there. So I like to educate people on what their belonging archetype is, which means how do they find their sense of belonging. There are 4 archetypes: the chimpanzee, the meerkat, the snow leopard, and the wolf. And depending on what archetype you are, I recommend different strategies, and then you just follow that guidelines, and I can near damn guarantee people that their sense of belonging will increase, which is exceptionally important, especially for men these days who are really feeling, left out and pushed out and
Yeah.
marginalized. And it's that sense of belonging is really important.
Yeah, men have really had a tough go of it, and I'm not diminishing, females. I have about a 50-50 split on the audience here, but I've noticed it, and of course, I always have to say, okay, am I biased by this because I'm a man? But I've seen, men have had a really tough go of it. Um, a lot of it due to the behaviors of some others over time, but that doesn't include all of us. But sometimes blanket statements or movements and things like that can really create some challenges, and the the broken homes. Half of homes are in divorce situations, and it just that all you know again creates that sense of belonging. And you mentioned it yourself, being an adopted individual, that is something that can be really hard to overcome some days, but you did. You've overcome a lot, and I commend you on that. That's
Thank you.
something that
Thank you.
I think people need to say more to people when they hear stories of what they've overcome in life, and it's like, celebrate that. It's perseverance, and it shows that Because a lot of people could easily just say, you know what, I'm gonna curl up. I'm just gonna be what I'm gonna be and don't care. But you know, you could have
Mhm.
taken that money
Totally.
that you made and just said, you know what, I'm just gonna party it out and till they flame out, and then boom. But no, you saw a greater purpose.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
So, what advice would you give people that are really struggling with finding their purpose?
Um, I recently heard of a term that's called purpose shaming, and I kind of like it. It basically, like, some people don't have a purpose, and their purpose is their family or whatever, and I'm okay with that. I didn't used to believe that, and my wife and I would often kind of get into arguments about me pushing her to find her purpose, and her kind of being like, "Well, my purpose is our family and the home and whatever." And I kind of have grown to appreciate that, to be honest. That being said, I think purpose is exceptionally important. Um, so for me, it was certainly um, reading Simon Sinek's Start with Why, not Find Your Why. But start, that's it for his book for corporates. But I think Start with Why is like a really important book for people who are looking to find their purpose. That really helped me purpose, for me. And my purpose is to help people strengthen their sense of belonging. So I'm doing that through my book. I'm doing that through my retreat venues that I'm building, which is basically a location for corporate offsites and team
Hmm.
retreats. Um, and it's called Assemble, and that's my purpose. But and I really hope people find their purpose, even if it's something quite simple, like deepening their consciousness.
Yeah, no, it's very important for people to find out more about themselves. That's some of the best research you can do is to find out more about you and find where you belong and truly be there. So, love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
But so it depends. Belongingquest.com is a really great place to learn about the book, but really danjberger.com, DANJBERGER is really the best place, because that's where there's links to all the stuff I'm working on. Or obviously social media, Dan Berger on all the on all the things.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely have all that in the show notes. So, Dan, appreciate you. Congratulations on the new baby, and good luck in the future. And really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.